Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. I'm so glad to have so many of you with us. I see a lot of Australians in the crowd, some Irish guests. I see people from all over, and we really like offering different time zones, so we're able to have our viewers from all over the world who can't necessarily make other times. So welcome to all of you. Today we have a great session, and we're going to be talking about hints and tips for British research using MyHeritage. Oh, I don't know what that was. A little blip in the system, but it looks like we're back now. So again, welcome to all of our viewers from all over the world. So glad to have you all with us. Today, we're going to be giving away a MyHeritage complete plan to one lucky winner. One of the viewers here that's with us will be giving it away. And in order to enter, all that you have to do is leave us a comment in the comment section. Today, what we want to hear from you is we want to hear how MyHeritage historical records have helped you. We'll be talking a lot about historical records on MyHeritage today, and so it's very fitting that the contest today will be about historical records on MyHeritage. We want to hear about what you found, what you've discovered in the historical records. So please leave us a comment and let us know. And one lucky winner will win a MyHeritage complete plan, and that complete plan includes free and unlimited access to 12.5 billion historical records, unlimited family tree size, access to all of our photo tools on MyHeritage. That's MyHeritage in color and the MyHeritage photo enhancer. So some really great tools there that will help you out and help you advance your research even more. So again, in order to enter, please just leave a comment and let us know how MyHeritage historical records have helped you on your family history journey. And I would like to now introduce our guest today. We have with us, joining us today, Caroline Curney. She's a qualified professional genealogist with a master's degree in family and local history. She's just started a PhD at the University of Bristol, researching Bristol's Jewish community in the 18th and 19th centuries. Caroline and her cat, Humphrey, live beside the sea in Portishead, Somerset, and we're so glad to have her with us today. Let me just bring her onto the screen here. Hello, Caroline. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi, Esther.
How are you today? And it's just so nice to have you here. We're really excited about this one. I know we get a lot of requests from our British users and users around the world with British family history for more advice and tips for them. So this is really a great subject for us to talk about today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here and thrilled to see all the different countries that people have come from. I spotted Ukraine and Finland in there, and I'm wearing my T-shirt from my Baltic cruise, which included Finland. So here's a shout out to our Finnish visitor. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. You did a short bio of me. I should say that actually I've been researching my British family history for 35 years this year. Started off, before the days of internet research. And I have ancestors myself from England, Scotland and Ireland. But I also have ancestors who managed to leave England in one of the first waves of migrants to New Zealand in 1841, then came back via Australia. So I've actually got kind of worldwide research, and I have a big American branch to my family and Canadian. My mother was actually born in Canada. My ancestors kept leaving England to try and be something else, but kept coming back.
So if you have a Canadian branch, maybe we're related.
I hope so. That would be lovely. So are you ready to share the slides then, Esther?
Fantastic. Let me bring them up here. Let's see. There we go.
That's brilliant. So welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. And I'm going to be taking you through some tips for using MyHeritage for British research. Now, the first thing I wanted to share with you is the fantastic number of records that actually we have on MyHeritage for British research. These are historical records. And you can see that for the whole of the UK, that's England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, there are 591 collections, and it's over 1 billion records. England, obviously, because of its relative size, has the largest number of those, 385 collections and nearly half a billion records. But still a good collection for Scotland, 113, 110 for Ireland, 17 for Wales, and even the Isle of Man and Channel Islands. There's some interesting records in there. And before those who are watching from Ireland jump on me, I should say I checked the Irish collections, and only one of those historic collections actually dates from after the formation of the Republic of Ireland. So they are British historical records for this purpose. So let's look at how you can find what's there, because I think one of my first tips to you is it really repays looking through the MyHeritage collection catalogue and seeing exactly what collections are there for the area that you're interested in researching. You can access that from the homepage of MyHeritage, from the top bar menu. You can click on research, and you'll get a drop down menu there which has collection catalogue with the American spelling, and if you go into that, you can then narrow down to look at the UK collections, and you'll see the arrows that I've got there pointing to parts of the collection. If I just try to zoom in here, you can see, first of all, on the, I beg your pardon, I've gone many slides instead of zooming in. Right. Okay, sorry about that, folks. If we look here, you can see on the left-hand side that I've refined by location. So from the whole of the MyHeritage collections, I've refined down to Europe, and then below that to United Kingdom. And you'll see that there's a section to refine further. So you can actually look at the constituent parts. You can look for England, Scotland, or whatever. And then below that, there's actually an option to refine by years. And then if we move over to the top right, you can see that there's also an option to search by collection or keywords. So as you get used to doing your British research and you know what collection you want to look at, maybe you want to look at the 1939 register, which is one of the collections I'm going to look at today, you can actually type that in and go straight to that collection. And I would advise, especially for people who are beginners, there are so many records available on MyHeritage that it can be a bit overwhelming. And sorry, I've had a little blip there. Just to say, if you're a beginner, it can be a bit overwhelming to have so many records, and it's a really good idea to search down to collection level and just look within that until you get familiar. And it's always a good idea to go by collection. And then you can see also, I've pointed to the number of records. So at the moment, this is sorted by the number of records, but you could actually also sort alphabetically. Okay. So today, I can't possibly, in the time available, go through all the records available on MyHeritage for British ancestry. So I've chosen to actually show you how it's possible to research 180 years of English and Welsh ancestry using 5 different collections. I apologise to those of you who primary interest is Scotland or Ireland, but many of the tips I share will apply also to there. And obviously I can't cover the whole of the British Isles in the time we have today. Those the 5 collections I'm going to look at are the collection of births and baptisms from 1538 to 1975. Those are mainly from parish registers. I'm going to look at what MyHeritage calls BMDs, 1837 to 2005. Those are births, marriages and deaths. And I'm going to look at censuses. We're so lucky to have censuses, usable censuses from 1841 every 10 years to 1911. And I've no doubt that when the 1921 census is released in a couple of years' time, that MyHeritage will probably have that too. The probate index, which is the index of wills from 1858 onto 1943, and then, as I mentioned before, the 1939 register. And the way I'm going to do it is by showing you how I could trace through the MyHeritage records the ancestry of my own father. This is my dad, sadly no longer with us. Born in 1919, died in 2004. His name was Geoffrey Cyril Bentley. And I have to thank MyHeritage for this amazing colour photograph. The photo, I've known it all my life in black and white, the only photograph available of my father's childhood, because he came from a very poor family. But I had no idea what it was, how special it was, until I used the colorization feature on MyHeritage. And I'm going to start by finding my father in the 1939 register. Now, the 1939 register is a very special document. It's sometimes described as a census. It isn't really. It was taken on the 29th of September 1929 because Britain had just entered the war, and a whole up-to-date list of everyone in the country was needed for a whole variety of purposes, the main one of which was the introduction of rationing. And so it was just a one-off snapshot, if you like, but it also was carried on for a variety of other reasons, and I'll explain that in a moment. So first of all, I just want to show you my father in the 1939 register. This is him at the bottom, Geoffrey C. Bentley, and that's correct. His birth date was the 23rd of December 1919. He's shown a single and a civil servant in the air ministry, and I'm very lucky that he actually was still around for that, because he was subsequently called up into the army. And you'll see that MyHeritage are very correct in just saying that it's implied that there's the head of the household, Vivian M. Bentley. It's implied that these people are wife, relative, and relative, because no relationships are actually given in this 1939 register. What it does give you, though, is an exact birth date, which is incredibly helpful, especially if you're searching for somebody with a very common name. And MyHeritage, one of their great strengths here is the beautiful, I should say impeccable, sourcing to each of the areas that they've taken primary historical records from. So this gives you the full TNA, that's National Archives record reference, and then broken down into its various items. It also gives you the date, 29th of September, and the area, this case it was the Lambeth area of London in England. Now, the 1939 register, sadly, is only at the moment available on any website for England and Wales, and that you can access it for Scotland and for Ireland, for Northern Ireland, but for Scotland you have to give so many pieces of information that basically you're telling them what it is that you already want to get out. So it's quite difficult at the moment. Really hoping that that will go online for Scotland before too long. It's a very important document because it bridges the gap between 1911, which is the last census that's currently public because there's a 100-year rule, and today. And 1921 should be released early in 1922, but thereafter we've got a gap, because the 1931 census, sadly, the warehouse in which it was contained caught fire, and so it's been lost. And in 1941, because of the war, there was no census taken. It, as I said, was used mainly for ration books, so it's very complete. But you need to note that it doesn't include people who were already in the armed services. But if they were on leave and at home or anywhere else, in a hotel maybe on leave, then they were included. So that's kind of a bit confusing. But that may be why you won't find men of fighting age. Also bear in mind that people were displaced, even this early in the war, in the 29th of September, people were displaced because they were evacuated away from the major cities like London, Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool. And the people who were evacuated were children. If they were under 5, their mothers went with them or could go with them, and pregnant women, and also people who were teachers, for example, accompanying school children, or if they were evacuated because they were maybe patients in an institution, then their carers and nurses would go with them. So you may have to look carefully to try and find them in the 1939 register, because they may not be where you're expecting them to be. Now, the exciting thing about it is that it was kept up to date during the war, and in 1948, when the National Health Service was introduced, it was used as the basis for the for the National Health Service records. People's numbers were allocated to them on the basis of this 1939 register. And as a result, for example, if women married, there was a note on it that the name was changed, and it was noted on the bit of the register that you can see, because some of it is redacted. So if you're looking at an ancestor or family of an ancestor, and you see something in a different hand scribbled above it in a green or red ink, then it may well be that it's a name change, and even a date on which that name change was recorded. The only problem is that someone who was absent from the country, maybe they were out of the country at the start of the war and didn't get back until after 29th of September, they won't be there. And of course, those who were born during wartime, rationing went on up until 1952. So they will have been issued with a ration card right up until 1952, but they're in supplementary registers that haven't been published. And the other thing to note is that if the person is under 100 and still believed to still be alive, then their entry has been redacted. That's blanked out. But each year, as more information is available about deaths, and as that 100 years rolls forward, more and more names are included. So it's a really, really helpful source. So having started with, assuming I didn't know any information about my father to start with, having started with the 1939 register, which gave his birth date as the 23rd of December 1919, my next port of call would be in the England and Wales Birth Index on MyHeritage, which shows Geoffrey C. Bentley, birth date. Now, this is, you see, January, February, March 1920. He was born on the 23rd of December, but his birth was not registered until the first quarter of 1920. The birthplace links up really well with that 1939 register, and there's his mother's maiden name, Eaton, which is really helpful for our purposes. And it shows the volume number and the page number for ordering the full birth certificate. So here are some tips for the birth indexes on MyHeritage. You need to know that registration of birth, marriages and deaths in a typically British way did not start on the 1st of January, but the 1st of July 1837. So the births, marriages and deaths are available from the 1st of July, and that's the third quarter, July, August, September of 1937. The date, as I've explained, is the date when the event was registered, not when it was it actually occurred. So don't make the mistake I've seen in so many family trees of saying someone was born in January 1920 using the first month, or even March 1920, the last month of the quarter. No, you only know that their birth was registered then, not when they were born. And as I said, it's a quarter, not a month. The place also is a registration district. So they may actually have been born in a village, a specific village, but it's included in a larger registration district, which might be the nearest town. So thinking of near where I live, it might say Bristol, when they actually were born in a village on the outskirts of Bristol, but fell in that registration district. Now, you saw on my father's entry that it showed his mother's maiden name, which is a crucial piece of information. That's only given from September 1911 on this index that MyHeritage have. It is possible to find the mother's maiden name from the General Register Office's own website. But you can find it in any case by ordering the certificate, and I'd really urge you, certificates are expensive, but for direct ancestors, there's no substitute for getting that certificate, because it gives you the exact birth date and place, the full names of the parents, including the mother's maiden name, the father's occupation, and the name of the informant, who can often be, if it's not the mother or father, maybe somebody living in the house with them, maybe a grandparent, somebody who was present at the birth. So it's well worth getting that certificate. So armed with the information about his birth, I'm then going to take you back for the next piece of the next link in the chain back 180 years is the 1911 census. And one of the things about MyHeritage is you really need to make sure you scroll down the page for any transcript that you look at, because they give you a lot of information, but often in kind of two different sections, and it's really worthwhile making sure you've read everything. So this is the census transcript. We saw in 1939 that the head of the household there was Vivian M. Bentley, and his wife was Alice. Well, his assumed wife was Alice. Now in the census we can see that Alice was indeed his wife, and we know that her maiden name was Eaton from the birth index. And obviously my dad wasn't born then, so there are two children there, Francis Percy and Reginald Vivian Bentley. Now I just want to zoom in on where I've pointed. First of all, you'll see there's the name, and there's a birth given for him in the census, transcribed here as about 1875 in a place called Loftus in Yorkshire. And the about 1875 is because the census doesn't give the date of birth, it gives the age. There's the residence. There's the age from which that birth was calculated. And this is really important. It's showing years of marriage, 6, his occupation, the wife and children, as I've said. Right. Now, if we move down the page to the second part of that transcript, here we've got Vivian again and the other 3 members we saw before. But look, here is the whole household, and there's one other member of that household, William Munden Stewart Bentley, aged 27, who didn't appear in that first part of the transcript because it was just showing the relationship of people to each other, and MyHeritage quite rightly didn't assume any relationship. Who is this William Munden Stewart Bentley? He's got the same surname. He's obviously going to be an interesting person in terms of researching. Okay, so tips for the 1911 census. This is the actual image on MyHeritage of that census. Make sure that you always look at the actual image, click through to it. One of the things that's really interesting is down here, for example, at the bottom, you will see the number of rooms in which the family lived. Now, at this stage, there were mum, dad, 2 kids and a visitor, but they're only living in 3 rooms. I told you they were poor. And one of those rooms is a kitchen. It says you're to count the kitchen. So actually, they only had 2 rooms. And in fact, for most of my father's childhood, when they had 6 children finally by 1919, the parents and some of the younger children slept in one room, 3 of the children in one bed, and some of the older children in another room. And the one room was they also lived in. The other thing is, it's the first census that was filled out by the householder in person. So this is actually your ancestors' handwriting here throughout the thing, and their signature here, which is both interesting and can be very useful. Now, I'd like to give you some tips for the 1911 census. As I said, it's completed by the householder in their own handwriting. And for each married woman, it gives the length of marriage, that figure that was on the transcript, 6 years marriage. That is so helpful in now finding the marriage of the husband and wife that you found in the census. And it also gives the number of children born to the marriage, breaking it down into the number still living and the number who had died. So if I just go back one here, you can see married 6 years, and it's really hard to read it on the screen, I guess, but it's 3 years and 3 years, 3 there, 3 children, all of them living. And interestingly, one of those children, I beg your pardon, it's 2 children, 2 living, yeah. Okay, so that's really important information, because when you look at censuses, very often you'll find that there have been additional children who have died between 2 censuses. So you get your family in one, then you go to the next, and you never spot those children if you just look at censuses. So in 1911, it at least tells you that there were children who died. The good thing also is that people got confused by the form. So although it was supposed to be filled in only for married women, you'll very often find that widows and widowers also put in details of their marriage. And although it was crossed out by the census officials, you can still read that information. So always look for it. And as I said, there's also that number of rooms, including the kitchen. Well, armed with the knowledge of when they were married, 6 years before April 1911, and with the names of both of them, I'm able to find their marriage in the England and Wales Marriage Index on MyHeritage. Here's Vivian Macaulay Bentley's entry, married in the July, August, September quarter of 1904 in Kingston, Surrey, England, and again the volume number and the page number with which you can order the marriage certificate. And sorry, gone too far. Here is Alice's, Alice Eaton's. Now you can see that the date of the marriage, the place, and the volume and page number match those of Vivian, but MyHeritage, like all the other family history websites, use an algorithm, because this marriage was before 1912. They use an algorithm to try and work out who the possible spouse was. And at this period, there were 4 people, 2 marriages on a page. And unfortunately, their algorithm here has picked up the wrong person, simply, I think, because he also had the quite unusual name Vivian in his Christian name. So that's really unfortunate. So don't take it as absolutely read that the possible spouses, MyHeritage are very careful to say implied. They are only implied, and they could be wrong. So like the births, registration started on the 1st of July 1837. And the date is the quarter when the marriage took place. Now, they were always registered pretty much at the same time they took place, because of the way the registrar was either present at the marriage, or there was a minister of religion of some sort who was the person who conducted the marriage and was licensed to register the marriage. So it's always pretty much registered on the day. So you should be in the right quarter for the marriage. The place is the registration district, not the district, not the actual town, not even the church, the synagogue, the mosque, or wherever they were married. And you won't get the spouse's surname in the index, as I said, until 1912. And as I've also said, of course, that algorithm can be wrong. Now, again, I'd urge you to order the certificate, because you can get the exact date and place of the marriage. That could be quite important, because if it's a church, as it overwhelmingly was at this date, you may well find that they're not Church of England, that they're Catholics or Methodists or whatever, and then you will know where to look for church records. It will give their full names, their ages, their occupations. Usually you may only get it for the man because the woman wasn't working, but by this date of 1904 for this marriage, you may find an occupation, and their places of residence. You'll get their marital status. That's incredibly important, because if a woman had had a previous marriage, she will marry under that name, not under her maiden name. And for tracing her family history, you need her maiden name. And then the other really, really essential piece of information from the certificate is the names of each of their fathers and that father's occupation. Okay, well, because obviously you have to order those certificates, and I'm just looking at what's available on MyHeritage and how you can do it even without those certificates, I'm not going to be able to show you that. So I'm going to jump back now from the marriage index in 1904 to 1891. And you may be saying, Caroline, why aren't you looking at the 1901 census? Well, the answer is that my grandfather, Vivian Macaulay Bentley, managed not to appear with his parents in any of the censuses from his birth, which was actually 1874, right up to 1901. And so I jumped back to the 1891 census because the only time he appeared with a relative, a direct relative in his nuclear family, if you like, was in 1891 when he was at school. And he was at school with his brother Ernest. And as you can see, I know this is my ancestor, Vivian Bentley, from the place he was born and the date he was born. But I can assume a pretty close relationship with Ernest, who's born apparently a year afterwards, in fact, 3 years afterwards, because they're at the same school, Kingswood School in Lansdowne, Bath, and it's a school for the sons of Wesleyan ministers. That's a really important clue, okay? So if it's for the sons of Wesleyan ministers, I can make an assumption. It may not be accurate. They could have been missionaries or grandsons, perhaps, but, you know, I'm possibly looking for children of a Methodist minister. And you'll notice that this is not a household, this is a school. And I'd like to give you some tips for looking at institutions in the censuses. This is Kingswood School, frightfully posh. It looks, today it is actually what we call a public school, which is a fee-paying school. But it was founded almost as like a charity school for the sons of Methodist ministers who couldn't afford much of an education for their sons. And it counts as what the census officials knew as an institution, which includes schools, hospitals, workhouses, prisons, etc. And they use special forms. They're not like the forms used for ordinary houses where you can go through a street and look at the house numbers. You have to go right back to the start of the form to look for the details of the institution. It's on a special page. Now, those are not actually available for this particular 1891 census institution that I looked at. So this is my plea to Esther to please could we have that page? But MyHeritage have transcribed it and I looked and it's been transcribed entirely accurately. And so from that I was able to find that it was Kingswood School. So from there I'm going to jump back to the 1881 census 10 years before. As I told you, my ancestor Vivian Macaulay Bentley managed to be away from home. He was actually staying with cousins on his mother's side down in Dorset, which proved to be very useful for tracing her family, but not much help for tracing the Bentleys. But look, here's Ernest. He's 4 years old, so born 1877. That matches with the Ernest in the 1891 census. And he's born in Loftus and Clevedon. And look at the different spelling here. It's spelt alternatively Loft House and Loftus. And there's actually 2 places in Yorkshire with that name. And this is distinguishing which one it is. So again, really, really useful for finding the right place. And although I haven't got time to show you it today, one of the wonderful resources on MyHeritage is the topographical dictionaries of England and Wales and Ireland, I think as well, where you can look up a place. And if you look up Loftus, Loft House, you will find the 2 different places in Yorkshire, and you could work out which one that was. And then look at this. We've got, first of all, start with Joseph, the head, who is his Ernest's father. He's a Wesleyan preacher, so that ties in really nicely with being at school for the sons of a Wesleyan minister. His wife is Emma H., but we don't know her surname. And then they've got other children. They've got Constance, born in Ringwood, Hampshire, and Joseph U. Bentley, only 6 months old, born where they are living, which is in Holsworthy, Devon, Under Lane, Holsworthy, Devon. And of course, domestic servants. Sometimes you'll find your ancestors as the domestic servants in these households. Now, I've got some general tips for looking at British censuses. And this applies to censuses in Scotland, Wales, and the 2 that survive for Ireland, the 1901 and 1911. don't take anything that you read in the census for granted. As a professional genealogist, I quite often get clients who've been unable to find something because they have really believed that he must have been aged 54 in 1911, because that's what he said, and he must have been born in a specific place, and neither of those facts was actually correct. There are many reasons why people made mistakes or even lied to the census takers. As you go back into the earlier censuses, people might have moved from another part of the country and be worried that if they became liable to the parish or the Poor Law Union for poor relief, they would be sent back. And they didn't trust that the information they gave in the census wasn't being shared with other authorities. So they said they were born in London or Bristol or Liverpool when they weren't. The names are not necessarily the birth names. People often adopted another name, a nickname or whatever, and people can appear in the census with a variety of different names. If people were illegitimate but living with the person their mother subsequently married, they might well show a different surname from the one in which they were registered. Ages can vary very widely, particularly for women who tended to lie about their ages in the earlier years or the middle years of their lives. And then when they got old enough to have some bragging rights for being very old, they then went back to what they were actually, their actual age. So the earliest record you can find when they were children and their parents gave the record is usually best. And also remember that in 1841, for anyone over the age of 15, the age was rounded down to the nearest 5 years. Then the enumerators often made mistakes because they copied it up from forms into the enumeration book. The transcriber, I mean, MyHeritage's transcribers, I think, are excellent, but, you know, inevitably human error is going to come in. You need to check whether you're looking at one inhabited house or a household. And you also need to check that it's the complete household. So always go over the page if they're on the bottom of the page. Always go back one page if you're at the top of the page. And always check the neighbours, because they may well be living close to, if not next door to, somebody who is related to them. Well, armed with the information from the 1881 census about Joseph Bentley, Emma H. Bentley, I went looking in the England and Wales Marriage Index again for their marriage, and I found it, guess what, in Ringwood, Hampshire, which is where one of the children was born. It was July, August, September, quarter of 1868, and they have actually, the algorithm has worked absolutely correctly here. His wife was indeed Emma Harriet Munden. And going back from that, I then, because I know Joseph's age from the census that we just looked at, hang on, I'll just go back to that slide. You can see he was 40 in 1881, so I'm looking for around 1841. I then jump back two censuses. I didn't look at the 1861 census, which didn't, or I haven't shown you the 1861 census. I did look at it, but it doesn't give you any additional information. I jumped back to 1851, and here we have the 1851 census with Joseph, who had said he was born in Barnsley. Again, I need to just flick back. I'm sorry, because I didn't point that out to you. Yorkshire, Barnsley was his place of birth. Here he is, Joseph Bentley, 11 years old in 1851, so that's 1840-ish born. He's a scholar born in Yorkshire, Barnsley, as is his father, John Bentley, his father's wife, Anne Bentley, his older brother, Thomas, and Joseph himself. And then the younger ones are born in Holsworthy, which is also in Yorkshire. Look at this one. Alonso, 5, a scholar born in Spain, a British subject. To this day, I'm still trying to work out what the family were doing in Spain. John Bentley, although he was packing linen yarn in 1851, was actually a bleacher. And I'm thinking it's something to do with British help for the Spanish textile industry, which was just then taking off. But I don't know any more than that. I don't know where in Spain, sadly. And then another daughter born in Horsforth, which is where the family finally ended up, and one born where they are at the moment in the census in Hunslet in Yorkshire. Okay, so, well, have I got the right person here, and can I find out anything more? Firstly, I went back one more to the England births and christenings again, and here are those two brothers. Thomas Bentley, the older brother, registered in 1838 in the Darton registration district in Yorkshire. So you can see they were actually born in Barnsley, but they're registered in Darton because that's the registration district. I beg your pardon, I'm so sorry. This is not the registration district. This is the England births and christenings. This is the last set. So this is their baptisms. They were baptized in Darton. So I've got an exact date of that baptism. And you can see it's Darton rather than Barnsley. They're very close together, very close together. And as I said, people will often give an approximate place for where they were born in a census. For example, I was born in a small town in Surrey. If I was talking to somebody else who was from Surrey, I'd probably say exactly where I was born. But if I was talking to someone who was British from another part of the country, I'd probably say I was born in Surrey. If I was talking to Esther, I'd probably say that I was born just to the south of London, because I wouldn't assume that she'd know exactly where all these places were in relation to the rest of the geography of England. So they were actually baptized and they were living in Darton at the time, but they gave their birthplace as Barnsley, which was a much bigger place. So these are drawn from, by and large, this data set is drawn from parish registers. And you can see the parents there, John Bentley and Anne, the same parents who were in the 1851 census. Some tips for those parish registers: don't just rely on indexes and transcriptions. Check the originals for accuracy, always. And that you can often find somewhere online. A lot of them have been published, or you can get them from the archives that holds the parish registers for those particular places. Check them for additional information. On the baptisms, you may well get a birth date, particularly later on, an age. Just because they were baptized then doesn't mean they were babies, and sometimes families baptized in batches, and you'll find a group of children aged from sort of a baby to 7 or 8. You'll get the actual place of residence sometimes and the father's occupation. For marriages, again, you'll get residences if they're not coming from that particular parish where they were married, and you'll also get the groom's occupation. For burials, you may get an age, a residence, and an occupation. Sometimes you get an eccentric vicar who made remarks about the people, particularly if there was something unusual, like a big age difference between the couple, and you'll sometimes come across wonderful pieces of information, or the fact that they'd only just got married when the baby was born and baptized. And also remember that your ancestors may not appear in these registers because there, as well as the established Church of England, there were nonconformists, which typically the word is used for Protestant nonconformists, like Baptists or Independents, Congregationalists, Methodists, Quakers. But it may also, you may also find the ancestors, particularly if they had Irish ancestry originally, are in Catholic parish registers. Now that's taking my father's ancestry back that 180 years to the births in 1838 and my ancestor Joseph Bentley's birth in 1840. That's exactly 180 years from today. But just to show you that I'm not just making things up along the way, there are two records that will show that it actually I've got the right family. Here is the 1901 census where Vivian doesn't appear, but in Ernest, his younger brother's household in Wimbledon, born in Loftus and Clevedon, 24, exactly right. There's his wife and his 2 children, but there also is his father, Joseph, the Wesleyan minister, born in Barnsley. And there is that brother who was in the census in 1881 in Devon, whose name was actually Joseph Hugh Bentley, but had got mistranscribed as Joseph U. Bentley. And he's in the census there with him. And finally, I should also, finally, here is the probate index that I told you was so useful. Here is Joseph dying in 1903 of 103 Pelham Road, Wimbledon, Surrey. Died 7th of August 1903, so he's still in Wimbledon, although not at the same address as in 1901. Administration granted London 22nd of August to Vivian Macaulay Bentley. So although I have never found them together in the census, I finally find them together in death. And this is Joseph Bentley. The only picture I have of him from a family album, it was in very bad condition. This is the picture after being colorized and enhanced using MyHeritage tools. And what a good job they've done of what was a very badly water damaged picture with a lot of mold all over it. So some general search tips just to round off with. As I said at the beginning, try to search by collection. When you're putting in information about an ancestor, always start broad and narrow down. Always start with Geoffrey Bentley and don't give what you think might be the names of his parents or his birth date or his death date to start with, which is why you should start by searching in a collection, because it won't be so many hits. And then you can always add those in one by one to try and narrow down to find the right person. And search flexibly. If you search by a name and a birth date and you're not finding them, drop the birth date and search by another piece of information that you've got. If you've not got finding the place you're putting in, try and search more broadly on place. Try different name variants and initials. He might have been recorded as GC rather than Geoffrey Cyril. Try different combinations. Above all, if you've got someone unusual, as I have with that Alonzo Bentley, if you're looking for a John Bentley in Yorkshire, it's actually quite hard going, and I have never found this family in the 1841 census as a result. But an Alonzo, now that's a different story. And use keywords, for example, because I know that he was Joseph was a Wesleyan minister, that keyword of Wesleyan in a census, even without his name, might narrow down enough to find him. So thanks very much, Esther. That's the end of the slides, so we can stop sharing them.
Thank you so much. I loved seeing that photo of your father colorized. That was incredible.
Yeah, it's I've had amazing fun playing with that tool on MyHeritage, and I've had some just terrific revelations from seeing them in color. So I'd urge everybody to use that tool. It's really good.
Fantastic. So before we get to a few questions, we have a few nice comments that I wanted to read out here.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so Graham said, thank you. Some great details about the records coming here. So I think everyone here learned a lot from these different collections and what they can gain from each one of these different type of record collections. And I just want to remind you all, we did put a handout to Caroline's session. We put a link to the handout in the comment section. So if you haven't taken a look, it's a cheat sheet for all of the details that she reviewed here. So please do take a look. And in addition, we have a lot of users that are joining us in between, that have joined us in the middle or even at the end of today's session, or even if you've watched it but you want to rewatch today's session, you can do so. It will be on the MyHeritage Facebook page, facebook.com/MyHeritage. Under the video section, that's where you see all the MyHeritage lives that we've done, and you'll be able to rewatch this in case you missed anything. You don't want to miss it. There was so much fantastic information that I know everyone will want to make sure that they've got down. So just a few reminders there. So just a few nice comments. Debbie said, I found my mother's aunt from Scotland who had emigrated to Australia and lost touch with the family. That's a great discovery. Sarah said, I've just found a distant cousin through MyHeritage and my DNA. He has gone back to 1432 and found we have connections to Edward IV.
Wonderful.
Incredible discoveries over here. I see we have a lot of different discoveries. Mandy says, hello from South Australia. I'm originally from Essex, UK. I have researched my family tree and found relatives back my 6 times great-grandparents on my father's side.
Brilliant. Well done.
So really, really incredible. So now a few questions that we have for you, Caroline, from some of our viewers in the audience. Let's see. Ingrid said, I only managed to join a few minutes ago, but I have a question. When did the birth records stop adding the maiden name of a child? I heard they started in 1915.
Sorry, 1911. Yeah.
1911? Okay. Okay, great. Carol asked, I have family that left Scotland and went to Belford, England. The Scots did not like the churches there, so they formed Erskine Street Presbyterian Church. How do I find out where in Scotland, really across the border, my ancestors came to Belford?
Well, the censuses hopefully may give that. Unfortunately, Irish and Scottish ancestors sometimes just wrote Scotland or Ireland in the census record, which can be very frustrating. But if you are lucky, they will give you, if you go through all the censuses that they were in England, you may find the place. And the later the census, generally, the more information is given. So make sure you look at all of them. And then, of course, MyHeritage have got Scottish censuses. They haven't got the images. None of the family history sites have got that because those are kept by the Scotland's People website. But MyHeritage have got Scottish records transcribed, just the transcript in the indexes for some of the censuses and also for some birth, marriage and deaths. And I think I'm right in saying, Esther, that those are taken from the family search transcriptions, which are very good for Scotland. They're very complete for their coverage of Scottish parish registers. And of course, the established church in Scotland, the parish registers for them are Presbyterian because that was their state church, not Anglican, not Episcopalian.
Okay, fantastic. Carol says, thank you, Caroline, for detailed tips on research. Some of my ancestors' details may be revealed yet with my enhanced skills. So we really do hope so. We hope that it will help you. We have a question here from Gloria, and she says, still trying to locate my great-grandfather. I have my grandfather's birth certificate, but having trouble as my grandfather was born in Ireland and find no info there on my great-grandfather. But I do in England. Can't find any info to say it's the same person. I guess certificates might be the next step.
Depends on the year in which you're searching for Ireland. You're doing absolutely the right thing to try and find as much information as you possibly can in English records first, because of the loss of Irish records. As you probably know, we've only got surviving censuses for Ireland for 1901 and 1911. And just depending on what year they came to England, if it's before 1901, then you're not going to have any census records for them in Ireland, but you will have them hopefully for the family in England. If your ancestor hasn't left a census record that says where they were born in England, it's worth, if you can, exploring the wider family in England if you know of them, because you may find a sibling who has, or even a parent. It just depends. You haven't given a date for when you're researching for going back to Ireland. And this could be a whole Facebook Live in itself, Irish research. But that's one thing, to look in those censuses. Obviously, if they married in England, then the marriage certificate won't give you where they came from, but it will give you the father's name and occupation. So then you've at least know that you're looking for a birth with a father's name of X. So that will help. In Ireland itself, yes, the birth, marriage and death registers there. Be aware that they were later for the Catholic population than for the much smaller, the minority in the Church of Ireland. So you're not going to find anything before 1864 for the Catholic population, but earlier for Church of Ireland. And the Catholic parish registers, which depending on the dates again. I mean, my Irish ancestors all came early and often were born before there were parish registers, but they haven't survived. In many areas, they haven't survived before, say, the 1830s. But there are also things like, very quickly, Griffith's valuation in the mid-19th century is particularly good for people who left because of the Great Famine, and the tithe allotments, and various other records in Ireland, which I would recommend looking at Maurice Gleeson's website or John Grenham's website. Maurice is on the DNA side of things, and John Grenham is, a recognised expert on tracing family in Ireland. Oh, I should say that Griffith's valuation is on MyHeritage and many other records besides for Ireland.
Fantastic. We have time for one last question. So this question is from Moreland, and he asks, is there a UK record of divorces? What years does it cover?
There is only a very small window of surviving divorce records for England. And those at the moment, I don't think I saw them. Esther, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're on MyHeritage. To be honest, I think you're more likely to find records of a divorce sometimes in the newspapers. Quite often, particularly if it was an interesting local case. I mean, I cracked a case for a client solely because there was a record of a divorce in a local paper in, I think, the 1940s or 50s. After about that, they tended to spare people's blushes. But before that, you quite often find a record. At least you'll find the names. If you look for the ancestors' names, it's sort of Roe v. Roe or whatever, and the area, you may find it in newspaper records. And for that, you probably need to look at the British Newspaper Archive. Oh, I should say, for newspapers, MyHeritage has one fantastic resource, which is the Jewish Chronicle. If you have any Jewish ancestry in the UK, the only other way you can access those archives of the Jewish Chronicle is by subscribing to the Jewish Chronicle, which I think is about £160 a year. So within your MyHeritage subscription, you get the Jewish Chronicle for free, archives, and it's incredibly useful because there's an awful lot of birth, marriage, and death stuff there.
Yes, it's a fantastic collection. I know that a lot of our users are very pleased with that one. So
I am, for my PhD research, I can tell you, save me a packet.
Fantastic. I see here that Claire says, please do a session on Irish ancestry. So I guess we'll have to plan something a little more specific for all of our Irish, everyone in the audience with Irish heritage, and I know there are a lot. And we're really trying to make more specialized sessions for all of our viewers that have family history, that have connections all over the world. So we hope that we can do more of them to help you all out. So now I just want to award one lucky winner a MyHeritage Complete plan. And as we said, it'll give that winner complete unlimited access to all of the historical records, all the ones that Caroline showed us today, and all the photo tools, as well as unlimited family tree size, which is really an incredible plan that will help jumpstart your research. So today the prize goes to Christopher Collins, and Christopher wrote us in the comments. Congratulations, Christopher. And your comment was, thanks to MyHeritage, I found that my great-great-grandmother emigrated from Oban, Scotland to Melbourne, Australia on the, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Ticonderoga, also known as the Hell Ship. Over 30% of the emigrants died of typhoid fever on the voyage. She was one of 13 children, and her mother survived, but her father and 4 of the siblings perished. Wow, what a story, and what a discovery to be able to learn about their journey across the ocean, and really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Christopher, and we'll be in touch with you through private message to claim your prize. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And Caroline, thank you so much. We really appreciated this. This was so thorough, and I think we all learned a lot.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
And we hope that you have a nice day. And everybody out there, we hope to see you at our next Facebook Live. So bye, everybody.
Bye.